we'll move to gender identity and expression. Okay, so I shared some keywords here before I share the full information. So I'll just share some keywords because I don't want people looking at the text too much. So I'll share that in the next slide. So I think it was Fiso or Queen who said something about social construct or something to do with society. So the keyword there is social construct. So your gender identity basically is what society says gender is. So society says women and men are the two genders that we have. So those are the two binaries that we have. So a man would typically be someone who, let's say maybe a boy rather, a boy would be someone that whose parents would put him in blue. They would buy him something, toys like cars. They would ask him to help with tending to the garden, washing the car. Those, or wearing pants. So those are some of the typical things that society has said that men do. However, gender is something that changes over time. I think it's something that has evolved a lot over time. So by that, I mean, females or women rather would not be allowed to wear pants if it was 50 years ago. And I can assume right now, I can safely guess and assume that there are people who identify as women on this call today who might be wearing pants. 50 years ago, that might not happen, or maybe 60, 70 years ago, that would be something that's not allowed. So gender, like I said, is social constructs, and these social constructs evolve with us over time. So again, gender identity and expression are not the same. I'll get to the expression part in a bit. But what's important for us to note with gender identity is that gender identity, so I said your sex is between your legs. However, your gender is between your ears. Basically, I mean, it's in your head, it's your psychology. And by that, I mean, when somebody is born, let's say, I'll give an example with myself. So I was born male, meaning I was born with a penis and testes between my legs. And then the doctor or the nurses, whoever was in the room at the time, said to my mom, hey, it's a boy. So they assigned me the gender of boy to my sex, right? So my sex was male. Then society, the doctor, the people in the room who form part of our society and community said, it's a boy. And by them saying that it's a boy, meaning that I'll grow up to be a man, and there were some expectations by society that are put on the label of a boy that I had to fall into and go through and have. So meaning I had toys like cars, I would play games like soccer, maybe cricket, whatever we thought that was only for boys at that time, maybe 30 years ago or 33 years ago when I was born. And then when somebody is born female, they assign them the gender of girl at birth, and then they grow up to become a woman. However, the interesting part, or where it changes a little bit, is when somebody who was born male says, look, I acknowledge that I was born male. However, I do not feel like I'm a male. I do not associate or identify with the male with the man identity or with the masculine identity of being a boy or a man. So that person would then be called what? Maybe let me throw it out as a question to everyone. Do you know what we would call somebody who was born male but does not identify as a man or a boy, but they identify as a girl or a woman?
The society will call that a sissy.
I beg your pardon?
The society will call him a sissy.
The society would call them, yes, that's true. But then that would be a derogatory term. I'm looking for a term that person might also use on themselves. Let's say they come to you, Puseletso, when they want to tell you who they are. I see there are some comments in the in the chat section, so I'll open that for a while. Someone says morphe, gender non-conforming, somebody said gay. Then somebody said, the last one, it says transgender, the last two. That's definitely correct. So somebody who was born with a different sex and then they have a different gender, because sex and gender are not the same. Sex is what you're born with between your legs. Gender is societally constructed, and it can change over time with society. So if somebody says, okay, if society says that I'm born male and males are boys and boys do this, and I don't like blue, I don't like playing with cars, I like wearing pants, I prefer the pronoun he instead of she, and things like that. That person is called transgender. And the word trans on its own means to move or to change. So for example, in transport, when you transport something, you are moving it from one place to another. So with gender as well, it means that you are transitioning or moving from one gender to the other. So that person would definitely be called transgender. And there are about 3 stages. This is something that I coined, but it could be a little bit more. But I believe that there are 3 stages to people who might be saying that they're transgender, right? So trans people are not the same, and they should not be expected to be the same. And by that, I mean, there are some people who might be trans who are, okay, there's a comment here that caught my eye, so I'll get back to what I was saying. Transgender means when you change your private parts through surgery. Yes, so this is actually, it ties in with what I want to talk about. So not necessarily, but you could also be correct. So by that, I mean, there are 3 stages, or there are 3 different types of transitions for transgender people. So number 1 would be people who transition only socially. So I'll give you an example with myself again. Let's say I was born, because I was born male, let's say then I decide, I grew up and I say, no, look, actually, I think I'm a woman. I might be male, I might still have my testes, I might still have whatever features that a male might have, but I identify as a woman, I prefer to be called a she, and I might transition socially, maybe by changing my name to a feminine name, just socially. I might also do things like maybe start changing the way I dress, maybe use a little bit of makeup, use different kind of hairstyles, whatever that I, as a transgender person who's transitioning socially, feels makes me a woman. Right, so that's number 1. The second stage, or the second way in which some people transition, is after transitioning socially, some people remain at the social transition and they are comfortable and happy with that. However, some people will then move it to the next level and say, look, I want to transition also with hormones, right? So like we said, when we spoke about sex earlier, we said the hormone that makes people females is usually estrogen. That's the higher hormone in women, rather. So in females or women. So this person will say, okay, I'm going to transition socially. Then they start going for hormonal therapy. And they maybe go see a doctor, or they go to a local clinic, or some local hospital, no, not local hospital, sorry, academic hospitals offer this for free. But you also find that there are organizations, NGOs, that also offer this for free, especially in the big metropolitan areas in Johannesburg, Pretoria, Cape Town, and Durban. So these people transition with hormones. So a male-bodied person will then go and take estrogen to increase their level of estrogen, so that they can start having softer skin, so that they can start having softer hair, softer, longer hair, lesser bodily hair, so that they can start having a less of a deeper voice. They start having a softer voice. They start having curves and all the things that people who are female or women might have. So that's transitioning with hormones or hormonal therapy. And then the last stage is when the last stage or the last option. So this is not for everyone. Some people are happy remaining with option 2, with hormonal transitioning. And then the last part would then now be people who want to transition with surgery. So these people are not only transgender now, so they want to transition sexually as well. They want to change their sex, what's between their legs. So they then change that with what we call gender reassignment surgery. The government offers it for free in about 4 or 5 hospitals in South Africa currently, but people who go and do the surgery on their own pay roughly 180,000 rands, if not more. This was the price that I got when I asked about it 2 years ago. I was asking about it for research 2 years ago. It was about 180,000. So it could be less or it could be lower because now there are a lot of outlets where people can get this done. So people might consider the surgery if they've got money, if it's something that they feel completes their transition. But some people are happy transitioning socially. There are a lot of people that I know who might have transitioned only socially and they're happy with it. There are people who transition socially and with hormones and they're happy and they don't want to go to the next stage. So people are different, transgender bodies are different, and not all trans people will transition in the same way. Okay, so maybe just a recap again. Sex, what's between your legs, your gender is what's between your ears or in your head, your psychology. And then we'll get to gender expression. So your identity is you, is who you are. It's when you say, my name is Fiso and I'm a he. It means you identify as this he. You are a man. You are somebody who is comfortable doing or following some of the rules of society about what men do, some of the constructs that society has built over years about what men do. So yeah, I think that's the gist of what gender identity is. But before I move to expression, there is also, interestingly, a third gender that I will share. So there are men, there are women, and then I see there's a question in the comments. I'll get back to that question. I'll answer just now from Yamkela. So I think that there are people that we might know who might be gender non-conforming. I'm assuming that we might have bumped into a person in our lives who we were not even sure if they were a man or a woman, or we're watching TV and we're looking at someone, we can't tell. We're like, oh, this person, are they a woman? Are they a man? And I think it's very important to share this, especially if you are somebody who works in a profession that deals with a lot of people, where you deal with people, where you interact with a lot of people. And I think most of the people on this call do work with a lot of different people. So these people are usually called gender non-conforming, or they would be gender non-binary, because women and men are binaries that society have put, right? So by explaining what kind of a person a man is, we are putting them in a box in a way, or putting them in a binary and saying men do this, women do this. But some people say, okay, if you say that a man does this and a woman does this, I identify as non-binary. I'm not a he, I'm not a she. I'm not a woman, I'm not a man, I'm just Lerato, I'm just Queen. And then we'll say, okay, what can we put, what pronoun can we put? Because we mostly use English in our interactions. I know that in most African languages, we don't have gender pronouns. I know in my language, which is Sepedi, Sotho, there are no pronouns. So, for example, if I step out of the room now and somebody wants to know where I went, they won't say, where is he? They'll just say, okay, which means where are they? Then, it brings us to the point of how do we address gender non-conforming people? Or if you are interacting with somebody whose gender pronoun you don't know and they haven't said it to you, or you have no idea what it might be, the best way to do it is always to use a neutral gender pronoun, which is they. Some people who are gender non-conforming use the pronoun which is upcoming, mostly in the States or in the West, which is called zir or ze. It's not something common in South Africa at the moment, but in South Africa, the gender non-conforming community or gender non-binary community are okay and comfortable with using the pronoun they. Okay, so I think I'll go back to the questions just now. Okay, so I'll take a few questions before we move on. Someone asked if is it possible for transgender people to get pregnant. So a trans person can still get pregnant if they didn't have surgery, if they didn't go the whole 9 yards or go the whole full way of surgery. Because like I said, trans people transition in different ways. And for people to have a baby or for them to conceive a child, all you need is ovaries, eggs, and sperm. So if they still have any of those things, then it means that you can still have a bit of you can still conceive, you can find ways to have a baby. So it does sometimes, it can happen sometimes, but depending on the type of transition that person has had. There have been a few famous trans people who have gone through surgery, who might have had top surgery. Let's say this person is transitioning from being, so this person, let's say, is a trans man. So they only had top surgery, meaning they only removed their breasts, but they still had their vulva, they still had their womb, meaning they still go on their monthly menstrual cycle. So meaning that they can still conceive. They just wouldn't have the breasts, but they can still definitely conceive even as a trans man. So I know it can get a little bit complicated there. So let me know if that's clear. If not, we can try and tackle it from another angle. And then someone says, sorry to take you back. I don't mind being taken back. Thank you for asking something now, because then it might get a bit difficult if you don't ask now for you to follow. With intersex, you mentioned that some never find out that they're intersex. Is that only because they never test to find out, or lack of information? Well, it's a variety of reasons, right? So it's because sometimes it doesn't bother them in a way that it never shows up in any way. It never shows up in any way that they could be intersex. It could just be that maybe they try conceiving for a baby for a very long time, and they just think, maybe I'm just somebody who just wasn't meant to have kids. You know, they try for a while, but it could be, it's not always the reason. There are other many medical reasons why people might not be able to conceive, but sometimes it's because they're intersex and they don't know, and they just like, maybe it's not meant to happen for me, and they don't know that the reason might be that they are intersex. And for some people, yes, it's because they might suspect that they are intersex, but because it might be expensive, but also because of the stigma and the shame that society might put on them, and that it might make them feel uncomfortable going to find out what could be the reason why they have a little bit of an elongated clitoris, what could be the reason that they have an opening, an extra or additional opening below maybe their penis. So things like that, people might never want to find out because they might be uncomfortable with it. Okay, and then there's the last one here that I'll take before we move on. It says, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Xolani Twala, and I'm a he. My question is, where does culture fit in? Am I correct when I say it fits in under social construct? That's definitely correct, Xolani. It does fit under, because culture is also made up of a lot of constructs. In any culture around the world, people have constructed what they believe a man does in their culture, what a man's supposed to do, what the men do, what the women do. So it does play a huge role. So people who are transitioning might want to fit into a certain binary or box. So they will follow what their culture says or what their traditions say a woman might do. So in Botswana, there's an activist in Botswana who transitioned from being male to female. I mean, from being, male to female, from being a man to a woman. So she had the full surgery, had surgery, and her family after her surgery decided to go and reintroduce her to her ancestors. Her name escapes me at the moment. If it comes back to me, I'll type it in the comments or share it with you. So her family did a ceremony for her to reintroduce her to the community and to the family as a way to welcome her now as a woman, because she was born male, she was introduced to the community as a man, then there was a huge ceremony that was done. But it's not always the case for everyone. For some people, it might be a little bit different because not everyone has those privileges or that luck where the family or people in their lives are understanding, or where culture can evolve or adapt to changes or things that are a bit new. So Yamkela says that, I mean, for a person that has transformed, Yamkela, the correct or more socially accepted term would be transitioned, not transformed, from a man to being a woman. Went through all the process and surgery of changing the body parts. You know, now he is a full she. Can they get pregnant? No. If they have transitioned, it means that they have removed their ovaries. They've had a hysterectomy. If they've transitioned from a she to a he, so they would have had that removed. So they would not be going on their period anymore. But a lot of trans people, maybe something to quickly share, when they go for the surgery, before they go, they freeze their eggs or freeze their sperm in case they might want to conceive in the future. So the doctors give them that option, or the psychologists, because it's the process. When somebody transitions, they have to go through counseling. They have to see 2 or 3 psychologists who give a report and recommendation to say, this person is definitely ready for this kind of surgery, because it's a huge step. It's life-changing. It changes and alters a lot of things. It's a process that's quite continuous. It takes a while. It's a process that is quite heavy and takes a toll on one's body. So they give them an option of freezing and saving their eggs and sperm for future use in case they might want to have children in the future. Okay. So that's gender identity. I think there was someone who said they wanted to share a documentary with me. Yes, definitely. Please, you can share it in the comments if you have a link.
Can I ask the last question?
Yes, Queen, you may.
With regards, I think the information is mind-blowing. I think with regards to the sex, is it possible that someone is born without either a vagina or a penis?
I have never heard of that, but it could be. So according to the level of knowledge and the research that we have done, everybody is born with either a penis, vagina, or a little bit of both, or something in between. I haven't heard of anyone who was born without a vagina or a penis, no.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so by a little bit of both, I mean where it's a little bit unclear for intersex people. Okay, so that's social constructs and what we said about gender. And then your gender expression, before we move on to the next section, your gender expression has got nothing to do with your identity. So I'll give an example with myself again. I'm Lerato, I identify as a he, I was born male. I identify as a man, and I like to dress in pants. I like to dress in, I like to do things that typically men would do. I like to tend to the garden. I like to, well, when I was a little bit active in my youth, I used to like to play soccer. I used to like athletics. I used to like things that people would typically say men do, right? But that in my expression as well, I would express myself the way society says a man expresses themselves, in terms of how I speak, maybe how I do certain things. Even though my parents gave me a name that is not typically for men, a lot of people address me as she on emails and on things like that because they assume, right? So that's also the thing about assumptions. But typically in South Africa, Lerato is a name that's given to women or people who are born female at birth. But yeah, my expression then would say my expression would be masculine, or it would be what typically men would express themselves in. And then there are people who might identify as he's, who might be men, who might say, yes, I was born a he, I identify as a man, but they might like to dress up in feminine ways. They might like to dress up maybe in skirts. They might like to, I see someone saying drag in the comments, in the chats. Yes, so it brings me to the next point, which is transvestites, which is known as drag queen or drag king. So that's when people dress in clothes of the opposite gender, but they are not transgender or they're not trying to transition. They are a man who just like to wear clothing that is mostly identified as female or women's clothing. And they might do it for a variety of reasons, right? So they might do it because they're drag queens and having fun at a club. They might do it because they really just love it and it feels comfortable for them, even though they identify as a man, but they really just have something about putting on the doek on their head, putting on a bit of makeup, having a handbag or whatever, but they're not a woman. It's just something that they might really feel comfortable in. Some people do it for entertainment, and I'll give a very popular person. I'll share the name of a very popular person, Tyler Perry, right? He's an actor, for those who might not know him, and he plays the role of Madea in most of his movies. And he dresses up as a woman, as an elderly woman. He puts on a wig, he puts on a dress, but he's not transgender. He's just a transvestite in that instance, where he just puts clothes of the opposite gender for entertainment purposes, for money purposes. Like, that's why I said transactional, because he gets a lot of money from his movies. So he'll do it because it's, the bank also keeps growing as he does the Madea role. So it's for bank reasons, it's for transactional reasons, entertainment. But there are a variety of many, many reasons that we'll never know as humans why some people might feel comfortable in maybe underwear of the opposite gender. So you might see a young person that you might be working with wearing underwear of the opposite gender. It could be that they've asked their parents to buy it for them because they really don't know why, but they feel much more comfortable in that underwear. So that's until that person says to you, I'm transgender, you cannot assume. So the best thing we can say is that they're expressing themselves in the clothes or in the gender of the opposite gender too, the one that they identify as, or the one that we think that they identify as. Okay. So again, your sex is what's between your legs. A quick recap before we move on. Your sex is what's between your legs. Your gender identity is between your ears, in your head. And then your gender expression is just your presentation, basically, how you express yourself, how you present yourself to people. But it has nothing to do with your psychology, because it can change. I mean, tomorrow I can decide that I want to try out a doek, and maybe I want to try out a skirt, or I want to try out this new dress or whatever, but without me saying that I am transgender. Or I could get a role on a reality TV show where then I want to now, or I have to now start dressing up in a certain way that's a bit more feminine. It doesn't mean that I've transitioned. It just means that I am a transvestite. I think Yamkela is asking about tomboys and tomgirls. So yes, a tomboy would definitely be somebody who also likes to express themselves in clothes of the opposite gender. So a tomboy is a girl who is a little bit more masculine in presentation. A tomboy would be a person who's a girl who identifies as a woman, who doesn't fit into the binary of how a female-bodied person or a person who identifies as a woman looks like when we see them. And then maybe before we move on as well, there are people who are somewhere in between as well in terms of their expression, where we are like, is that person a man or a woman, where they are androgynous? The term is called androgynous. We look at them at first glance with their hairstyle. We look at the hairstyle, we're like, could they be a man? So a popular example would be someone like Prince, the late Prince, who was an artist. I don't know if that's exposing my age, but some people might know Prince. He was a Purple Rain singer. And then there's also Ellen DeGeneres. She is a TV show host. She used to have a TV show. She was also an actress back in the day. She's a little bit androgynous as well. So she comes across as somebody who, if you're looking at them from a distance, you can't really tell if they're a man or a woman according to their expression or according to their presentation. Those people are somewhat in between. And there are people that we know who might be somewhere in between those two as well. Okay, so is everyone clear on gender identity and expression and sex?
There's just one question in the chat. Nato, you're doing so well. Is a tomboy or tom girl not gender non-conforming? Is it a different thing?
That would definitely fall under gender non-conforming. Yes, GNC. That's definitely correct. So because a tomboy is a girl who says, okay, you are saying that girls dress up in skirts and they carry handbags and they put on makeup. Society is saying this. So I'm not going to conform to what society says. I'm going to express myself in a different way, right? So it could be that. But a gender non-conforming person could also be an identity. So it could be an expression. It could also be an identity. So these two things are not the same. So I just want to clarify that. So gender non-conforming could be you're not conforming in terms of your identity, in terms of who you are psychologically, or you could just be non-conforming in terms of your presentation or your expression. So those two things are not mutually inclusive. So they could be different in two different people or in the same person. So I don't know if that clarifies it, but I hope it does. I see it's 1 o'clock, so I don't want us to not get to the other important bits and pieces of the presentation. So yeah, so this is basically a scale, and if I wish we were in the same room where I could look at everyone's presentation and their expression and say, I challenge everyone to say that there is no one, I'm yet to see somebody who is 100% masculine and 100% feminine, right? On that scale that I have there. I think that we might be more closer to being 99 or 98% on the masculine side, because in terms of our clothing, things have changed so much in terms of how we do things, in terms of how we carry ourselves, in terms of the things that we like even. Gender expression might also say that a man doesn't cook, but most men cook for themselves these days. It might say that a woman doesn't wash the car, but most women who have cars, who might not have been allowed to have a car 50 years ago, might wash their own cars. They might prefer to wear pants, but it doesn't change anything about their gender identity. It doesn't change anything about their their sex. It doesn't say anything about their sexual orientation as well, which we will get to just now. So gender expression and gender identity can be different, but they can at times be in the same side or be on the same side.